Hello, and welcome to a conversation that is not only going to help you communicate better online, it's also going to help you look and sound your absolute best, and not to mention, do really well on your speech assignments. My name is Tatiana Rodriguez. I teach public speaking, and I also do leadership corporate training.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Joe Yankus. I am also a professor of public speaking and a senior instructional designer at Rutgers.
Joe, I have to tell you, I feel like mediated communication has never been this important to our everyday lives, and it's also never been this accessible, right? I mean, it used to only be reserved for people who were in broadcasting or entertainment and who had really big budgets.
Absolutely. And mediated communication is our new normal. And by the way, mediated communication refers to communication carried out by the use of technology. So this conversation we're having here right now, or others you may have partaken in via Zoom or other web conferencing tools. And to be an effective communicator in our current landscape, you need to not only be effective face-to-face, but virtually in this mediated space as well. And while many of the same principles apply, this talk will introduce some of the key considerations you need to know as you prepare to speak here in the virtual space.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you on that, Joe. Our students really need to develop and craft these skills to be successful in areas of leadership, in public speaking. I mean, they completely go hand in hand. And I'm even willing to say that we need these skills in every single job because everywhere in our world, people now need to have an online presence, whether you're going to be a yoga instructor or in education or in business. Pretty much everything has kicked over to this online presence requirement. And so I'm really excited because we get to bring you awesome tips in 7 areas today: in audio, in lighting, video, hosting your own, all the things that go into verbal communication as well as nonverbal communication, and our mindset. So Joe, why don't you kick us off here? We'll go into our first area.
I will kick us off with audio. So you may have heard the term mic check in television production, and now that you are a producer setting up your space, it's something that you'll need to do as well. In most cases, your internal microphone built into your laptop will suffice. However, it's important that you test your audio to ensure that your voice is audible and free of echo or distortion.
Like this, Joe. Microphone check, 1, 2.
Check, check, 1, 2, Tatiana. If your mic check results in quality audio, you're all set. However, if it doesn't, a few simple steps will help you troubleshoot and improve your audio quality. So, step 1, assess the space that you are recording in. Does it have high ceilings? Is it a large room with empty space and an echo when you speak normally? If so, this will all most likely be captured in your recording. So consider finding a space which is smaller or even carpeted if possible. The less open space and hard surfaces in the room, the less echo there will be.
That's a really good point, Joe, because we very often think of the technology and don't think about our environment. A second thing that is so easy to do, everybody, that will vastly improve your audio quality is to use a microphone. And I use a external USB microphone like this. It wasn't expensive, but I got it years and years and years ago. And nowadays we have so many options, but you don't have to go out and buy a mic if that's just not in the budget right now. Your corded cell phone headphones will work super well. The microphone is placed very close to your mouth. The audio goes right in your ears. It does a fantastic job for no additional investment because you would have already had them. There are also USB headsets like this that a lot of people use. Something like this is $20 on Amazon. It's a Logitech one, but explore some options. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money, and it will improve the quality significantly. One thing, you see I'm wearing the Apple wireless earbuds, which connect through a Bluetooth signal. Now, I'm using these only for the audio in, and I use my external microphone for the audio out. I've seen a lot of students use these guys in their recordings, and because there can be so much interference with Bluetooth, I just want to give a word of caution, especially when you're working with other people across other lines. If you are not going across the internet and you're recording a video to your device that will be uploaded later, doesn't seem to be as much interference. But in group speeches or recording online, sometimes the Bluetooth can be a problem, and that's because You can be in an area with a lot of Wi-Fi activity, or there are poorly shielded cables, or even microwave ovens and other wireless speakers that can get in the way. So the takeaway here is that if you're going to use Bluetooth enabled devices, test everything out first. And even then, I think it's a little bit risky. Say if you're doing a one-time recording, test it all to make sure that it sounds good. But if you can go corded, I say go with corded things to avoid any kind of interference.
Absolutely. But the key takeaway here is this can all be done on the cheap. You don't have to be a mega superstar producer spending thousands of dollars to make this happen. So with hardware in mind, let's talk a little bit about placing your microphone. So assess where your microphone is placed relative to you. And if you're using your internal microphone on your laptop, where is your laptop relative to where you're sitting? And that will be important later anyway when we talk about framing too. So is it too far away and the audio is low? Is it too close and the audio sounds muffled or distorted? A trick is to hold your hand in front of your face and spread your fingers naturally. Place your thumb at your nose and your pinky relatively where the microphone is located. And make sure just that there is an appropriate distance so that you are not coming off too loud or too soft. If you have it too close, the mic will pick up your mouth sounds, and any further away, and the mic will pick up room sounds. So just be careful about placement of your microphone.
Yeah, excellent, Joe. Lots for you guys to think about when it comes to big area number 1, which was audio. So now let's move into area number 2, which is lighting. And I do come to you with a significant amount of experience, having been in photography and video for the past 10, 12 years or so. So when it comes to lighting, the main thing is that you have a main light that's lighting you, particularly your face. This is really important, right? Your face is the thing we want to see. We don't want to light the window behind you or the ceiling fan above us. We want to see you and see you clearly. And light needs to be flattering. And when it comes to light, we got 2 options. There's light that's natural, which is from the sun, or artificial light, which is pretty much everything else. So if you can get near a nice window, that's always going to be quite beautiful and flattering. Just remember, you should be facing the window because the window light needs to hit you, not behind or to the side of you. And now, there is nothing more beautiful, in my opinion, as natural light. However, it's not always available. So it's gorgeous, but a little unpredictable because we never know if it's going to be cloudy or rainy or too bright. So artificial light helps us solve this problem. That includes your lights at home, any lamps you have, or even little ring lights like this that I received from a little outing at the university. So think about it. Do you have little things like this? They sell the cubes, the LED cubes. I've seen a lot of students use those for video. That actually adds quite a significant amount of light into your video. So think about little things like this. They don't have to be big. Now, Joe and I both do use larger ring lights. I ordered mine with a remote control built in so that I can use that. But there's different price points on that, so you can find them online if that's something that you're interested in. But also, you probably have some lamps at home, and that is another source of light for you to consider. You know how when you walk into a restaurant with nice ambiance, or even your house, the lights have those warm yellow glows to them. Whereas if you think about LED lights, they're bluer and a little cooler. That's because we measure light on a temperature scale called Kelvin. And we're not going to get into all the details here, but something worth exploring if you are interested in learning more about light and white balance. What I want you to understand is that light has a temperature. Some lights are more yellow, some lights are more blue. And the idea is not to mix them. You want to match, right? This is a case where don't mix, match. So if we have cool light from outside, which is like more close to those LED lights, combining outside light and LED lights is okay. Combining outside lights with your inside tungsten lamps doesn't work really well because you'll get yellow on one side, blue on the other, and that mixing is very unflattering. And in photo and video world, we call it muddy when we mix up those colors. So you maybe even have noticed in some videos that you see online where people are like, why do they look so yellow or why do they look so blue? We're just not getting the right color temperatures. So there will also be limitations with whatever webcam that you're using. And sometimes we just need to accept that it is what it is as long as the lighting is nice. However, if you can control it, remember to match your lighting, but don't mix the blues and the yellows. Something that might be helpful too is to look into your webcam's software. My Logitech webcam, it's a C920. It comes with a program where I can manually adjust. Now, when I first got it, it didn't come with it for Mac because I use a Mac platform. So I actually purchased an app to control my camera called Webcam Settings. So number one, does your webcam have software that you can download and use, which would allow you to zoom, pan and tilt, adjust the brightness, and do some exposure controls? That would be number one, because then that already comes with your webcam. And if not, look into some apps that will allow you to manually control. Remember this, of everything I said, lighting is the number one ingredient that you need to make a quality video look good. We got the audio, which is going to help you sound good. The lighting is going to help you look good.
And that's an excellent segue to start talking about testing your video. It's just as important as testing your audio and your lighting. So similar to your mic check, during your camera check, you will assess the quality of the picture that your camera is recording. So you want to be on the lookout for grainy footage and frame rate issues where you appear to be lagging. This typically happens with older webcams, so it's going to partially depend on how old the laptop you're using may be. There are usually hardware shortcomings in that case that you will not be able to fix. So you'll want to look in your arsenal and see what else you have to consider alternate cameras that you have at your disposal. And this doesn't mean you have to have a fancy standalone camera. In fact, a smartphone or a tablet camera will very often suffice. And if you decide to use your smartphone or tablet camera, and you decide that those capture the best picture based on what you have available to you, there are a few best practices that you'll want to keep in mind. First, always record in the landscape orientation. Do not record in portrait. We have a tendency to do this naturally based on FaceTime conversations and Snapchat and the like. So we have a tendency to not always think to turn our phone this way. But remember, what you're recording here is most likely going to be viewed on a laptop or a desktop screen. So having it in portrait mode with bars on the left and the right is not going to be great for your audience. So make sure you turn this way and record in landscape mode. Second, you're going to want to stabilize your device on a flat surface, or if you happen to have one, use a tripod. They do have tripods for sale, which are specific for a phone, but you don't have to spend money to make this happen. You can stack your phone or you can place your phone on a stack of boxes or against a wall or on top of something. You can get very creative, and as long as your device, as long as your phone is safe, you just want to make sure that you stabilize it on top of something, anything that frames you appropriately. The idea here is that you are not recording freehand, because I most certainly don't have a particularly stable hand, and stabilizing your device will go a long way in adding to the production value and quality overall. And finally, always use your rear-facing camera instead of the front-facing one. Your rear camera typically is composed of better hardware than the front-facing one, so you will find that you will most always get a better picture from your rear camera than the front one. It may be tempting to use the front-facing camera because you can see yourself while you're recording. However, it will be a better picture overall if you use your rear camera. Now, on the other hand, if the video quality is an issue of framing or lighting, think about some of the other tips in this video to troubleshoot. However, if it's a hardware issue with your device, think about some of the options I just spoke about to review what other hardware you have available to you at your disposal and what you can do to troubleshoot that.
Yeah, Joe, stability is a huge issue. That's important. It just adds a more polished look. I mean, it looks more amateur beginner when there's camera shake, unless it's intentional. If there's a reason for why you're doing it, that's fine. Even if there's a reason why you're intentionally using portrait mode, as long as you know you're making choices here and how that's going to affect what it looks like. Rear-facing camera is always going to be better. I totally agree with that. Although I have a feeling in the future they're going to match up. But for now, the selfie cam style is always a little bit lesser quality. Now let's spend some time talking about camera angle, because I see so many students doing this with their camera angles like this, okay? You're taking your camera angle, you placed it down below, and people are shooting like this. Guys, this is what we call the nostril double chin shot, and it is not flattering for me or anybody for that matter. So please lift up your camera angles, guys, and place them so that the level of your camera lens is by your eyes. This is going to be so much better for you and for a better experience for the viewer. You're going to look good, but it also speaks to confidence and presence when it comes to recording your online video. So remember, and even sometimes make sure that you're able to look into your camera. A lot of students have multiple monitors and your camera is off to the side, which then becomes this, which is not great for looking. So making sure that you've framed it up nicely. Also want to teach you something called the rule of thirds. And in photography, if we place 4 lines on a scene, 2 horizontal, 2 vertical, it creates 9 different boxes inside a frame. And we find as humans it most visually appealing when content is placed at the intersections of those lines. So in these 4 areas. So think about that as you're framing up. Just another concept, a little advanced pro tip when it comes to photography and video that you can think about when it comes to framing yourself up nicely. Speaking of online presence, you want to frame it up so that it's not too tight of a shot and you're able to show your hands from time to time. This is filling the frame and being able to show your hands. Now with your hands, they indicate trust, okay? So we want to be able to periodically show them, even if you're not a big hand talker, that's okay. But being able to use open palm hand gestures in a video conveys an element of trust, confidence, and relatability. So frame it up so that you can use your hands when you need to from time to time. And when you fill it up, right, you are filling up the frame, you're taking up space, which automatically translates into a more confident communication.
And one last point we want to make relative to video is your backdrop. What is happening behind you? Because the subject lighting and all of that is very important, but obviously if someone is walking back and forth behind you while you're speaking, that will distract your audience. So try to select a neutral background, nothing too busy, no foot traffic, no distractions behind you. The main idea is you don't want the attention of your audience to be taken away from you. You want the focus to be on you and what you're saying and the message you are delivering. And if your audience is distracted by something like "Turn down for what?" and suddenly maybe they're singing a song in their head, maybe they are thinking and laughing at what's happening behind you, you want to avoid that. So make sure that your background is neutral.
Yeah, and in my opinion too, our backgrounds can be neutral, clean, clear, uncluttered, but they don't have to be boring either. Right? Always go for clean, clear, and uncluttered. But as you have time to think about your backgrounds and set things up, you can do things like lights behind you or even setting up some decor. I mean, I think it's nice to be able to show some of your personality. You just want to make sure that it's appropriate for whatever video and your audience is.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point because we don't want to look, we're just sitting against a blank white wall. And so there's a fine line and a balance to strike here with you could create something that's visually appealing, but also neutral at the same time. Neutral does not have to mean blank.
Right, right. Feel free to show your personality and your backgrounds too. But if all you've got is a blank wall, then go by all means, use what you got. All right, let's kick it off now, Joe, into our 4th big area for today. We talked about audio, we talked about lighting, we talked about video. Now let's move into talking about hosting our own meetings. Right? You and I, we're co-hosting today. So this is a partnership. We've got the 2 of us going, so we need to be considering chemistry. Right? You and I have spent a lot of time writing the content for today, rehearsing it, messing it up a little, trying again, going back and forth. But the idea too is when you're co-hosting that you're having some fun. Would you agree, Joe? What do you think?
I totally agree. I think it's a great point. And especially when you're co-hosting, you don't want it to feel too robotic. You want it to feel like there is a natural chemistry between you and the person that you are hosting with. I think that's super important.
Yeah. And then when you're hosting by yourself, there still needs to be engagement and fun and some chemistry, but it's only with your audience. Whereas the 2 of us here, we've got our audience to consider, right? Creating this message for them, being intentional about our wording and what we talk about, how we talk about it, but also how we talk about it with each other. When it's a one-person job, then you've got to consider how you're coming across to the audience and that your words flow well between. So there's hosting solo, hosting in a partnership, or even if you've got more than 2 people, if you're working on a team. So consider all of the chemistry, the points, and however much time you think it's going to take, remember, and you can trust us on this, it's always going to take more time than you think. So over budget time. What do you think, Joe? I know for sure, I think I think you're with me on this one.
Oh, absolutely. So, especially, there's a benefit of having a dynamic with someone else, but it also makes it a little trickier just to when you're trying to budget time for things because there's another variable involved of having two people collaborating, and it's wonderful to collaborate, but definitely make sure that you leave enough time, and that goes for hosting solo as well. There's something to be said for you might be looking to spend 10 minutes on something, but then it takes 30 or 40 or even longer. So something will always happen that will make things take a little bit longer than you may have anticipated.
Right. And we also need to consider the recording factor. How are we going to record our content? For us today, I'm using a program that I have for interviewing called Ecamm Live. That's ECAMM Live. But also we can do this on Zoom. Right, the video quality tends to be a little bit lower, which is why I chose to switch to Ecamm for recording interviews, but perfectly doable within programs like Zoom and Teams. You just have to think about where your recording is going. Are you recording locally? Are you recording to a cloud? And all the different considerations when it comes to how your screen is going to look. So before you finalize everything, play around with it, test it all out, especially in recording, and please back it up. Back it up, back it up. Always have backup plans because technology fails. Back in the day for me in college, I remember when it was things in floppy disks and I had a floppy disk crash and it was my entire final paper that of course was due the next day because I did not budget enough time, and I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate. But have a backup plan so that you don't end up with nothing and having to redo things, right? Computers fail. Wi-Fi fails. I'm connected to Ethernet rather than only counting on Wi-Fi, so look into connecting directly to your router through an Ethernet cable, which is more secure. And of course, sometimes people bail or get sick or have emergencies and can't be there with you, so it's another important thing to think about is backup options. If somebody can't come and there's no time to re-record, to know enough about what the other person's content was going to be that the show can go on. You know that saying in entertainment, the show must go on.
We mentioned how Tatiana and I are sharing this virtual stage here today, and with that comes certain principles of etiquette. If you were sharing a stage with someone face-to-face, you would consider some of those interpersonal communication etiquette that you would apply in the face-to-face space. All of that applies here in the virtual realm as well. Do not talk over your fellow speakers. Let someone complete their thought and chime in once you are certain that they have finished what they were saying. There are usually little subtle cues. There's a little science to this that you'll start to pick up as you do this more and more. When someone wants to speak, they typically sometimes they'll do you notice this, Tatiana? They might lean forward a little bit. They might open their mouth a little bit as they go to say something, and then someone else might chime in because they are not cognizant of that happening. And then
Definitely.
that person,
It's like
yeah.
being in a conversation. We know when it's our turn to speak and we know when to pause and let the other person speak.
Yes, and one way to help mitigate this is to utilize grid view. If you are conducting a call on Zoom, for instance, keep grid view on so you can see what's happening with everyone on the call. If you're in active speaker view and you can't see that someone who may not have spoken in 10 minutes and may not be in the row of active speakers, you see that they're starting to lean forward, that they want to speak, but you're missing that if you're not in grid view. So these little micro expressions can help you facilitate opportunities for everyone to speak. So just be mindful and keep an eye out for that.
And for those of you guys who are new to Zoom, the grid view, I think the technical name for it is gallery view. So don't look for a grid view, just look for the word gallery view and you'll be good.
And also keep yourself muted during periods where someone else is presenting, or if you are not actively participating in that portion of the conversation.
Oh, I'll be right there. Hold on a sec. Oops. My bad, Joe. I don't think I was muted there.
Keep yourself muted. It's distracting for the audience, and it's especially distracting for the presenter.
Yes. I know it takes that extra effort, especially when you're looking at a screen, looking at your content, looking at your camera angles, and so much to manage. But especially if your partner's going to be talking for long periods of time, keep it muted so that you avoid any unexpected distractions like the doorbell or your roommate knocking on the door, your parents calling you for lunch, your cell phone going off because you forgot to turn it off, any of those things. You want to avoid anything, and mute will be your friend in that. A little pro Zoom tip on muting is when you're muted, to quickly unmute yourself, press and hold your space bar. And this should work across platforms, and that will unmute, kind of like walkie-talkie style. So that spacebar will help you for those moments when you need to quickly unmute.
And the beauty of some of these platforms too now is that they do tell, so if you start to speak and you're muted, Zoom will actually notify you, you are muted. It will detect that you are speaking, and then you can just quickly unmute yourself. So don't be afraid of leaving yourself muted unintentionally. Zoom will notify you if you start to speak and you remain muted.
Right. All right. So those are some helpful tips for you when it comes to etiquette, which we can call netiquette since it's online, whatever you want to call it. Just make sure that you do it. All right. Now let's kick it over to one of my favorite things to talk about, which is audience engagement. I believe that we need to spend as much time thinking about our audience as we do writing our content. We get so focused on what we're going to say, we forget about the people who are going to be listening. But that's the whole purpose of what we're saying, is to connect and reach people. Chris Anderson, he's the leader over at TED, which if you're not familiar, please make sure you check out TED.com for amazing public speaking, people from all around the world with amazing content. And Chris Anderson has a TED Talk called TED's Secret to Great Public Speaking. And in it, my favorite line from it is, give your listeners a reason to care. I can get so fired up and excited about education and speaking and leadership and communication and self-care, but if I don't relate that back to you guys, it's not really going to land. And I love the line that he says, give your listeners a reason to care, because it reminds us that we have to continuously be connecting to our audience. Just because I love something doesn't mean that you love it too. But if I can connect it back to your world, show you that I know what life is like for you, it significantly increases the chances that you're going to be engaged with me, that the content, you'll remember it, and that it will be meaningful. After all, the whole reason we're doing this is to share meaningful content with each other. Keep in mind that we are busier and more distracted now than ever, especially for those of us who are working in online spaces. I mean, we're competing with things like screens, pop-up messages, notifications from dozens of sources, watches, cell phones, parents, kids, significant others, roommates, doorbells, deliveries, and even multi-streaming. And you know what I'm talking about, where you've got class open over here and something else open over here happening at the same time. It's like the video version, the online version of multitasking. It used to be multitasking in the physical space. Now we're also multitasking online, which of course our brain can only handle so much. So it doesn't really serve a purpose, but you have to know when you're speaking, this is what we're competing with. So if our content is engaging and meaningful to our audience, then people are more likely going to connect with us and not be distracted by everything else that's happening around our world. So remember that we need to keep our people engaged. And according to Bill Hugterp, great company, he owns Own the Room, has a book that I follow. I think it's called Your Perfect Presentation. We need to have a variety of content as we're speaking, right? So today, you hear from me, you hear from Joe, you hear from both of us. There's some visual elements, there's some audio elements, things to keep you engaged. We're continuously speaking to you, looking at the camera. We have to consider all of those things. And Bill talks about, well, variety creates energy, and that's why we need to have it. So we have to continuously, actively engage the audience, not keep everything the same. You can ask rhetorical questions, you can bring in stories, use vivid language. A really great one-word prompt is imagine, right? When you ask your audience to imagine something and then you go into a storyline. You want to make sure that what you prepare for the screen is visually appealing, that your content looks good, any slides, images, or even if you're using physical props, like something in your environment that you're going to show. And adding humor, of course, always does miracles for engagements. Number one way that we love to connect with people is by sharing a laugh, because remember, we don't laugh with people we don't like. So if we can share some humor together, that automatically builds engagement. And if you're in an asynchronous world, right, how do you build in some active participation in there? Think about these things. There's lots of ways to engage people, right? So those were some ways to engage synchronous or asynchronous. And then if you are with people physically in a space, then you can ask direct questions, you can do prompts, you can do body polls around the rooms. Online polls are a great way too to ask people to chime in and participate. So you have lots of questions, games like Kahoot is a favorite. And then don't forget that a lot of us can get a little tired of technology. Sometimes we just want dial it down, like well, whatever the acoustic version of things would be, just low tech or no tech. Sometimes we just want to keep it simple, but know your audience and be continuously engaging them. And remember to have fun, right? And enjoy the experience of creating meaningful connections with your audience.
We just spent a few minutes talking about how to engage your audience, but how do we engage our audience? We do so through verbals, the power of your voice, starting with robo syndrome. Robo syndrome is a chronic ailment impacting thousands of nervous public speakers every single day. Common side effects of robo syndrome include a dry, monotone voice with no vocal variety, bored and distracted audience members, and feelings of sadness and despair, realizing that you've lost your audience. While the cause of robo syndrome may vary, a common cause is reading directly from a word-for-word script. Scripts can be very helpful in the early stages of speech preparation while you are rehearsing. However, you should strive to wean yourself off your script and deliver extemporaneously and relying only on an outline to keep you on track. With vocal variation comes the idea of enunciation. Communicating in the mediated realm means that your audience may rely more heavily on your spoken word for understanding. Internet connectivity issues can diminish or eliminate nonverbal hints such as reading lips, and you would be surprised how strongly we rely on this for understanding, and gestures and things like that when connectivity is poor and the camera lags and stutters or flat out doesn't work. So this means that the focus is on your enunciation or the act of pronouncing your words, and that needs to be clear. So no mumbling or slurring your words together. Let's focus on volume. Similar to enunciation, volume is especially important in the virtual space. Conduct mic tests when you speak at your natural volume and make appropriate adjustments to your setup to accommodate the natural volume that you will likely slip into when you aren't focused on it. We may start our speeches trying to speak up and raise our voices a little bit, but as we get into the body of it, we may lose track of that a little bit and slip back into our natural speaking voice. So it's best that your setup accommodates your natural speaking voice in such a way that you can be heard, whether you are purposely speaking up or whether you've slipped into your natural speaking voice. If you find that your speaking voice is too low, consider alternate mic sources or maybe coming a little bit closer to your microphone. We talked about this rule before of assessing your distance between you and the microphone. And if you are too loud, which is also not ideal, try to sit a little further away. There is a fine balance that we can strike to make sure that your audience can hear you, but also that you are not raising your voice to them so loud that they have to lower their volume, which then means that they may not be able to hear other speakers on the call as well. With vocal variety, enunciation, and volume in mind, let's chat for a minute about pacing. Our pace tends to pick up when we are nervous. Have you ever rehearsed a speech for this class and while you're rehearsing, you hit the 5-minute mark or the 6-minute mark or whatever it may be, and then when you are delivering it live, suddenly it went down to 3 minutes, 2.5 minutes. How did that happen? You were a little nervous, so sometimes our instinct is just to get through it as quickly as we can, but that impacts our pace, which can impact the understanding of our message. So just be mindful of your pace and make sure that your message is clear and that it is clearly communicated as well.
There is a underutilized, powerful technique in public speaking that professionals, that people with experience know, and that is the power of the pause. Needs to be intentional. If we pause for too long, it comes across as crickets. Maybe I forgot what I'm saying, I lost my place. But if we're connected, our eye contact is there, the volume, the enunciation, the vocal variety, all the things Joe talked about, if they're there, if we pause intentionally, it makes people listen more. I often use this when I need to highlight something that's emotional. And I don't just mean sad, it can also be something conveying a lot of strength. Really important technique. I want you to practice with this a lot, knowing when to pause. You can even write it in notes to yourself. Pause in brackets as a cue. This helps us as an audience know where we should give our attention to, what's important to you, what's worthy of a pause. Taking a note, taking a minute. Side bonus of pausing, everybody, gives you a chance to breathe, gives you a chance to do a little catching up with some oxygen there that we all need, because when we're speaking, things get accelerated and we need to breathe. So use that power of the pause intentionally. A little pet peeve that I have is the use of question inflection when you're not asking a question. And it sounds a little bit like this. Hello, everyone. I'm Tatiana. I want to talk to you today about the power of video messaging. And then after that, I'd like to talk to you about lighting. So this is when we go up like we're asking a question, but really it's a period. So make sure that you're not putting a question mark in your tone when what you really mean is a period or an exclamation mark. This is a habit. I know that it is common for some people to do this, but remember, if you do that, it's when do we ask questions? When we're not sure, when we're doubting ourselves. So to sound like we're asking a question sounds like low confidence, uncertainty. And I'm pretty sure none of us want to come across as unconfident, unsure of what we're trying to say when we're delivering our messages. So make sure that that question inflection is only there when you are genuinely asking a question. Number one common issue for all public speakers is the use of filler words. Now, my thoughts on this are, we're not striving for perfection. Would it be fantastic if we never used a filler word? Yes, it would be. However, we know why they exist. It gives us a time to think. Food for thought. We don't write filler words. Even when we're pausing, we just pause. So I'd like to give you the same advice. Pause, don't fill when it comes to this. One student shared with me that it helps her if she just thinks about the filler word rather than saying it out loud. Find a strategy that works for you. For me, I know number one is helping you be aware of how many times you use filler words in a 2 to 3 minute space. So in our class, you will know your filler word count. You'll be tracking it throughout the semester, seeing how you do. But number one thing, be aware of it. Second, be intentional about not saying it, especially not to start with a filler word. If we open up, you see this very often in classes or in workshops, people will say, or so, as they're thinking. Rather, just be silent. Pause. Now that I think about it, rather than, and then go. So practice eliminating that, pausing and not filling, and it will help you decrease, if not eliminate, the use of filler words.
Just as important as your verbals is considering your nonverbals as well, what exactly your body is saying. Remember, your audience is not just assessing your spoken word, but assessing those nonverbals as well. Let's start with attire, dressing to impress. Keep it professional, keep it classy, give it that polished look. You want to make sure that your credibility is coming through what you're wearing. You don't want to wear a sideways hat. You don't want to be wearing a t-shirt with something distracting on it. The main idea is that you are polished and professional.
Definitely, Jomi. We need to match the tone of our video. If we're broadcasting a message or creating a video in a very casual space, then wearing a hat and t-shirt is probably just fine. But if we're doing a speech for class and we're asked to dress to impress, then that means we need to up our game, dressing professionally. And a number of things where I see students go wrong is, for example, women will show a lot of flesh and then you can see cleavage. So we want to keep it classy. We want to keep it professional. So bra straps shouldn't be showing. All the same things that would apply to interviewing for in a business environment. You want to do it that same way. And then there's lots of levels in between, right? Like you can look really good and not have to be in a full 3-piece suit or with a blazer and button down. So there are lots of levels, but the idea is that you want to dress to match the mood. But I also don't think that we need to act like we're in that movie Pleasantville where everything is black and white and the same. Just like we were talking about backgrounds, I think we can show our personality. It's okay to wear accessories, earrings, things. Just make sure nothing is going to jingle, especially near your microphone. Or if you have jingly things on your wrist and you speak with your hands, that's going to be very close to the microphone. So consider all this. And in your tech rehearsal, when you've recorded and tested it all out, you will know what kinds of things are making extra sounds everywhere. And Joe, what do you think? What do the guys need to do to prepare? I mean, for those of us with long hair, or people who wear makeup, we consider all of these things getting everything ready. And in photography and video world, I will look my clients up and down, head to toe, make sure things like flyaways, makeup, earrings is where it needs to be. What are some of the considerations that a lot of men will need to take when it comes to getting ready too?
So for men, it's important if you have facial hair, make sure it's trimmed, or go for it with rock the long beard, but just make sure it's tamed and brushed. I'll say avoid that look where it's kind of going in all directions and it just doesn't look clean and tamed. Give it a brush again, the same way as Tatiana mentioned, the same way you would for a job interview. Treat this the same way if that is the tone that you are going for in your video. So make sure your hair is combed. Make sure that your beard is trimmed and brushed and that you are presenting your best self forward. And if you're wearing a button down, just make sure you might need to do one of these, or make sure that your collar is not popping in the back, and just give yourself a look over. But again, the same way you would kind of look in the mirror and hype yourself up before you go to a job interview, do the same thing here. Go for that polished and professional look.
Yes, I am down with everything you're saying, Joe. I agree with you. Then next consideration, right? That's attire, our exterior, what we're saying with our clothing. Now let's talk about posture and gestures. Remember those sit up straight talks that our grandmothers gave us? I mean, this matters, right? It's very important. Not just long term as you get older, when you want to make sure that you're in proper alignment, really for everybody. But it also conveys a different message when you're on screen. I mean, this is one way of communicating, and this is another. So to me and to most people, communicating with confidence means having proper alignment and really strong posture. So you want to imagine that string pulling you up and sit up nice and straight. I have support. I have things, pillows and things behind me to help me keep myself in proper alignment. So do whatever you need to do to make sure that you're in really good posture positions. Now with our gestures, especially when we're nervous, anxious, hormones, chemicals, all these kinds of things are kicking in when we're delivering a message. You want to be more conscious of all distracting gestures. I see a lot of people hair toss, hair flip, or doing a number of these, and you may be completely not aware that you're doing it, because what's happening is when all these sensations happen, our nerves are involved and then things start to tingle and scratch and itch. So just be conscious of it. Do what you can to be calm, to breathe, drink water, stay hydrated. Don't consume caffeine before you record, because that's going to dehydrate you more, accelerate your heart rate. So taking really good care of your body, avoiding distracting gestures. And remember that any sniffling or coughing into the mic is going to sound really loud. So if it's coming up and it's unexpected, turn to the side so that it's not super loud in people's ears. And remember that anytime you go in a video, that comes across really loud, whereas that wouldn't happen in person. So key considerations, because we're so close to the microphone, to keep those in mind. All right, that's postures and gestures. Let's talk about facial expressions and eye contact. I cannot tell you this enough, and I feel like it's one of the messages I repeat 1,000 times to my public speaking students, and that is to please smile. We get focus mode. We get that, I don't want to call it resting bee face. I'm going to call it resting pissed off face, resting angry face, something else. But that face, because we're so focused and we're into what we're saying, right? We're taking this seriously, but then we come across like, not pleasant to watch. All it takes is remembering to smile. You can put a Post-it note above your computer somewhere to encourage yourself to smile, to remember to smile. It can go in your notes. You can put smiley faces everywhere. We just don't smile often enough when we're delivering the message. And as audience members, we love to see our speakers having a good time. How do we know they're having a good time? Because they're smiling, because their energy, because the way that they're speaking, because it helps us have a good time too. Right? We're a part of that. So when you as a speaker are enjoying yourself, or you look like you're enjoying yourself, it helps your audience enjoy themselves too. Simple thing is to remember to smile. I know not all messages are going to be conducive to smiling all the time, but at least in the beginning when you introduce yourself, and somewhere in the middle, and when you sign off. So be intentional about making sure that you smile more often. And Joe, what are your thoughts about eye contact to the camera? Because I know I feel super strongly about this, but let's hear what you have to say.
I do as well. And eye contact, just as it is important in the face-to-face realm, it's going to be important here as well. You need to address your audience. And the same way that you would not stare down at the floor or stare at a desk if you were delivering face-to-face, you need to address your audience directly in this virtual space. Address the camera directly. Take your finger if you need to, cover your camera, pull back, and here's where you need to look. Ready? There's a difference between this and me looking down at my screen. Right now, I am looking at myself, and that's easy to do when we are recording, right? We want to make sure we're framed correctly, and all that's important, but those are the things you address in rehearsal, so that you should be confident when you hit record that you don't need to stare at your little preview. You can just look directly into the camera and address your audience.
Joe, that's so funny. Two things. I do the exact same thing with my students. I literally take my finger, cover my camera lens. I do the same thing. Secondly, as people, we're always going to look at ourselves. There can be a picture of 100 people that we're looking at. If we're in that photo, we're always going to look at ourselves first. So it takes a lot of unlearning to not look at ourselves on the screen and to focus on the little tiny circle, which is this, black box of the video cam. And that doesn't feel natural. But that's what it takes to mimic natural eye contact. Until the technology is invented where we've got a webcam that can totally see through the screen, which I do believe that will happen one day. We will get there because a lot of us need that. So until then, though, we've got to train ourselves, just like broadcasters are trained to look into a camera, not necessarily be looking at themselves. We've got to be able to do the exact same thing, right? Training ourselves to give direct eye contact. You can put a little sticky note or a picture of an audience or someone you care about behind your camera if you need a visual prompt. And I was listening to a webinar once, and the guy on the webinar said, remember your friends behind the lens. A little cheesy, I know, but I've always remembered it, so hopefully it helps you to remember it too. Remember your friends behind the lens. One other tip about face stuff, guys, is that I shouldn't have to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway because it has happened. You should not be chewing gum. There should be nothing in your mouth when you are speaking or recording content. And we've all seen it, right? Nobody wants to hear you chewing. Nobody wants to see you chewing either. But also that people think that they're just going to hide it in the back of their mouth and then they flick it over, flick it around. Not necessary. So just make sure that you are not going to be that person that is chewing gum in their video.
Absolutely. And to take it back to eye contact for just 1 second, it's important, but don't be afraid to glance away as you need to. You don't need to make direct eye contact for the full the same way that you wouldn't stare at one audience member during the entire speech.
Staring contest, Joe.
Okay, let's say 5, 4, 3. I would lose immediately if we did that. So the idea is you can glance away. If you do need to take a peek down at your preview of your camera to make sure you're still in frame, to make sure your lighting didn't change, don't be afraid to do that. But it should not be for a long period of time. You want to be addressing your audience, but at the same time, you don't need to stare dead into the camera for the full 3, 4, or 5 minutes.
Absolutely. I agree with you. It's 100% right. The last area that we want to address with you is mindset. And while we saved it for last, I would say it is top level in terms of importance. When I'm hired to do portraits for somebody or to create a video story, the first thing that I do with my clients is to help them get comfortable with me and to get comfortable being in front of the camera. I'd like to advise you to do the same thing. Work on getting comfortable in front of the camera. I know it can be so nerve-wracking and it can feel so intimidating. You might even get a little anxious thinking about it. What starts to happen is that we're getting a lot of negative messaging about ourselves, and this can start to play and replay over and over again inside of our heads. Inner critics, perfectionistic tendencies, and even imposter syndrome can start to get louder and louder and louder as we do things like this, where we're sharing messages of value and important content with other people. It's funny how sometimes being brave brings up a lot of fear-based thinking, but you know what I tell all of my students? It's okay to be afraid. Do it afraid. Keep moving anyway, because there's something that's bigger than your fear. So answer that question for yourself. What's bigger than your fear of being on camera, being on video, speaking in public? For me, it's the purpose, the calling, the intention that I know I have on my life to be of service, especially to students who want to learn leadership, communication, public speaking, and self-care. To be able to move that message forward, that means more to me than the fears or the thoughts, the negative thinking I may have going on inside of my head as I'm getting ready to create content for you. So ask yourself the same thing. What's bigger than my fear? As part of your healthy mindset when it comes to speaking in front of other people. If you forget everything I say in this mindset section, remember this. What we tell ourselves in the privacy of our mind matters. If the way you're speaking to yourself is not the way you would speak to your very best friend, then I want to suggest that you revise that narrative. If it's not okay to talk to somebody we love like that, why would it be okay to talk to ourselves like that? Let's be compassionate. Let's be kind. I still want us to pursue excellence and challenge ourselves. But I also think that we need to give ourselves a break sometimes and be really gentle with the messaging that we tell ourselves. A lot of us get so nervous and scared when it comes to speaking in front of others or even recording content because we're making it about us. But I have a message for you. It's not really about us. It's not really about the speaker. I mean, yes, in some ways it is because we're creating the content, we're preparing, we're putting our heart and soul into it sometimes. But that's not the reason why we're doing it. We're not there because we want to shine. We're there because we want to deliver a message of value, want to change lives, inspire, encourage, inform, teach, whatever your reasons, which means it's not about me, the speaker. It's not about you, the speaker. It's about the audience and delivering a message of value. So hopefully that helps you as you think about mindset too. Remember, negative messaging can happen, especially when we start to feel fear, especially in moments when we're being brave. But do it afraid. What's bigger than your fear? Be kind to yourself. What you tell yourself inside of your own mind matters. And remember, we are lifelong learners. We are always growing. We can always do better. Honestly, every time I deliver a message, I think, well, I could have done this better. I could have done that better. But if we stay stuck in that, we'd never get anything done because nothing is ever going to be perfect. Remember, it's not about you. It's about delivering a great message to your audience. So take all these things into consideration. Whatever your message is, you don't have to allow negative thinking or an unhealthy mindset to prevent you from moving forward. Be in service of your audience rather than in judgment of yourself. So don't forget that you are valuable and you have a valuable message to contribute to the conversation.
I know that we've shared a lot of content with you here, but break it down chunk by chunk and maybe challenge yourself each time you hop on a new call or a new opportunity to practice this. Challenge yourself to implement something new. Maybe the next time you're on a call, you want to focus on eye contact. Maybe the call after that, you want to focus on your volume. Just identify little areas that you can work on each and every time. And it is an iterative process. You don't have to reinvent all at once. You don't have to implement everything that we've gone over all in one sitting. You can do this step by step, increment by increment. And with time and with practice, you will do well and you will succeed in this realm.
Bonus tip for all of you, everything that we're sharing here about recording messaging applies to your interviews. So if you're getting ready to secure an internship, interview for a full-time position, or even just transitioning and pivoting into a new career, everything we're saying here also translates into live in-person interactions when it comes to the communication piece. So, question for all of you is, how are you going to use these 7 awesome areas to help have stronger presence online or in person? Audio, lighting, video, hosting, verbal communication, nonverbal communication, and our mindset. And remember, now that you know these things, right, there literally is no going